Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Rolling Over 40. My guest today is Mr. Russell Melmed. Russell is a four-stripe blue belt who does not train anymore after a serious injury to his knee. We get into that. We get into sweeps. We get into passes. We get into takedowns, submissions, all things jiu-jitsu. But we first get into our mutual passion for wilderness backpacking. So if all you're here for is the jiu-jitsu, you probably want to tune in about 30 minutes into the start of the episode. Hope you enjoy. All right. What's up, Russell? Welcome to Rolling Over 40. Before we started recording here, you were just talking about how you and a friend are considering going on, unrelated to jiu-jitsu, you might be going to do a climb of Mount Shasta. And how serious are you about that? You think that's going to happen?
If I had to put a probability on it, I'd say 20% right now.
Okay.
Because it's just in the conceptual phase. It was something
Yeah.
I threw out there. Because my friend that I've known for a really long time, he shares my first, passion in terms of adventure sports, and that's, wilderness backpacking and adventuring. We're both turning 50 this year, and I put it out there that I wanted to do something, fun and adventurous. And I mentioned Shasta. And so that was the beginning and end of the conversation. My friend lives in San Francisco, or Marin County, more specifically. And so I don't know, the 20% is because we're both really into the idea, but we've made no actual plans, no bookings. We haven't looked at logistics. We've talked about the best season to go, and that's the extent of it. So that's why it's 20%, but I really want to do it. So I don't think it's not a casual idea. We want to do it.
Gotcha. So we need to talk about that a little bit because before I got into jiu-jitsu, wilderness backpacking was something I was doing pretty frequently as well. I took 2 trips to Peru. Most people go for Cusco or for ayahuasca. I went for, me and my buddies went for climbing. So we would go to the Andes. We did some pretty serious backpacking in the Andes, up in, we were up close to 20,000 feet and
Wow.
up in the glaciers, the ice. It's something that I'm glad I did because it was so hard and so freaking cold. I don't want to do anything quite that extreme again. But I did that. What else I did? Talked about it on another episode. I did half of the John Muir Trail with a
Wow.
buddy of mine. So we did the lower half, which was from a place called Florence Lake. That's where we started, all the way down to Whitney Portal. And that is, I think that's the part of the John Muir Trail with the most elevation gain or change or something. I mean, and it
So you
was
picked the
just
hardest stretch.
we picked the hardest stretch. Yeah,
Did
yeah.
you know that going into it? You're like, we're going to pick the hardest stretch. Or did it just happen to be the hardest stretch? Or was it the most beautiful and that's why you picked it, but it's also the hardest?
So here's the thing: I didn't pick it, and the guy who picked it didn't even end up coming. So he's a buddy of mine. His nickname is Shiesty, and he didn't get that nickname for nothing. It was his idea. He would do this thing where he would call up or introduce these ideas to a group of us, and then he had a tendency to bail, and then it ended up being everybody but him.
Everybody needs an ideas guy in their friend group, though.
That's right. He's the ideas guy. So yeah. So then I invited another friend, and then the next thing I know, Shiesty is out, and it's just me and this other friend of mine, Buddy. And it took about 8 days. It was one of the best experiences of my entire life. I'd highly recommend it to anybody. And again, I'm glad I did it when I did, before kids, before marriage.
Yeah.
Well, actually, it was right after I got married. But I mean, before I had, kid responsibilities, and I could take, 8 days and just disappear completely like that. And that was, it was special. Yeah, man, I'd love to do something like that again. But Shasta, 20%, huh? So how can you
20
boost that up higher to 20 than 20?
So I'd say a couple things. One is we've got to actually identify a date or dates.
Or
set
arrange
those aside, right? I mean, we just have to pick that time, make sure that we're both committed to leaving that open. And making sure that, my cousin Adam, who obviously you know very well, uh, is also available, because I'm not going to go up there unless I'm parlaying that with a chance to see my cousin. You know, I'm committed to making the trip work, but I want it to be a trip to see my cousin. So I want Adam to be there. I want him to do it with us, even though, he told me about your experience going up Shasta, and his telling is similar. But I think, you know, from his perspective, he he wasn't prepared for the rigors of what was involved. Um, and I've done quite a bit of backpacking, so I'm not concerned about the rigors. My only concern was, how technical a climb is it? And from what I understand, what I've gathered, it's not particularly technical, besides sort of needing some crampons and stuff when you're up touching the ice. So to me, it's picking the dates. It's making sure I'm going to, set aside the money that I need to make that trip happen. And then that's like, we're talking 75, 80%. The last 20% would be if something comes up, somebody gets injured, somebody loses a job. Those are the kinds of things that can derail any trip. But that's all. I'm picking the dates, setting aside the money, full stop, and then we're all full speed ahead. The only other thing that could derail it is I really want my wife and my friend's wife to go. And
You mean for the climb, or
climb.
for? Oh,
Yes. I really want them to go. If they chose not to, it wouldn't necessarily derail it. But I rarely go on trips like that. I mean, I live on the East Coast. I live in Connecticut. So making a trip out west and up to Shasta is more of a thing than it probably is for, somebody who lives in Southern California or anywhere on the West Coast, really. So if she wasn't going to go, I don't know if I would commit to, a week-long trip without her. That
But
could derail it.
so your wife has experience climbing as well.
She does. For many years, she and I went backpacking. She and I have spent some time in Alaska in the Wrangell Mountains. We did some backpacking in Denali. We did some backpacking um, in the Alps. So she's not unaccustomed to the rigors involved of like a multi-day trip in the wilderness.
When you say the Alps, you mean the Swiss Alps?
French
Alps?
Yeah,
Oh.
French Alps. So
I guess I guess I was referring to the same. I don't know that there's a difference there. Sorry,
range,
I'm dumb.
Just
it is the same
lines on
mountain
a
range.
map.
Okay, I'm not that dumb then. All right, so French Alps. Whoa, tell me about that a little bit.
Yeah, my friend Joe, who we're turning 50 together. He's the guy I want to go climb with Adam and my wife and his wife. He married a woman named Christine, who's from a tiny village named Ossois in the French Alps. And so we went to visit them a couple summers ago. She has a family home, which is like 100 years old, literally in one of the national parks. You can't buy land there anymore. You can't build there anymore, but she's got a legacy home inside the boundary of one of the national parks in the French Alps.
Have you been to that home yet?
Yep. That was where we went to. We stayed there, took a few trips up into the mountains. Literally you walk from her house into the mountains. It's not like, oh, we got to drive to the trailhead, or,
Right.
If I could show you pictures, I would in this podcast, but you can imagine it's just gorgeous.
That sounds pretty special.
Yeah. Her brother owns and operates the largest adventure park in the Alps there. So, think Via Ferrata, zip lines, things like that. So out of that,
sorry, I don't know what's Via Ferrata is. That a French word or something? I don't know what that is.
I don't know. Via Ferrata is probably Italian, if I'm trying to think about the origin of the words, but it literally means like iron road. So essentially, it's a system of chains, cables, and steel, or steel steps drilled into the side of a mountain that you climb on. You go places that otherwise, you would have need to be a really technically experienced rock climber or mountaineer to get to.
So that's Via Ferrata means that, basically, like,
yes, that's
okay.
Yes, and it's not just there in the French Alps. You can find Via Ferrata, all over the world. People set these up,
Okay.
and you got a harness, and you're clipping in these different cables, but
Hmm.
you're climbing on these, sides of cliff faces in these amazing places that, again, otherwise you wouldn't have been able to see or experience
Right. And
without
you're
that.
doing it very safely because it's
Very
all,
safely.
yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
very
I've never done
safely.
anything like that before. Not quite like
Yeah,
that.
pretty cool. I mean, it's pretty awesome. So I mean, my friend Joe's wife's brother runs that operation. So we spent a day out there doing that kind of stuff. Um, you climb out onto this one Via Ferrata route. You climb out of this 18th century fort out of a window and clip in from there, literally from inside this 18th century fort. It's
Jeez,
you
man.
know
I want to go.
yeah, and of course, no liability waivers in France, right? You just go and do it. They're like, here's
Oh,
your
is that
harness.
right?
Yeah, it's not like the United States. Nobody sues people there if you fall to your death, just because you didn't sign a liability
It's
waiver.
your fault.
Yeah, it's your fault. Don't be an idiot.
Yeah.
We told you not to unclip here before you clipped in here. Well, what are you doing? So
Right.
that was our time. Yeah, it was a pretty awesome experience. Worth going there. And of course, saved a bunch of money because we had a base that was
Right.
somebody's home right there. I
Yeah.
mean, when you don't have to pay to stay in an Airbnb and you don't have to rent a car, it's just about getting
Yeah.
there, really.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. And
pretty
you live on the
cool.
East Coast. I'm curious. Did you ever, with all the wilderness backpacking experience, did you ever have dreams of hiking the Appalachian Trail?
Maybe fantasies, but nothing. I never planned it. I could never set aside 4 months of my life. 'Cause I've been pretty career oriented, school, education oriented, career oriented, now family oriented. That
Hmm.
setting aside 4 months to do anything just wasn't ever in the cards.
Right.
Um, my daughter, funny enough, I got her into wilderness backpacking. She mentioned wanting to go and wanting me to go with her to do the Appalachian Trail.
The whole thing.
That's what she said. Um,
Wow.
now, on the one hand, I was incredibly flattered that my daughter still felt that I had the capacity to, take on such an endeavor. You know, she
Yeah.
doesn't think I'm like an old feeble man quite yet, even though I'm turning
Yeah.
50. So I was like, oh, that's good. She doesn't
Yeah.
think I'm incapable of things. Um, but my second thought was, there's just no way I could take 4 months to do it.
Sure.
Uh,
Yep.
but if she presses me on it, I could be convinced.
You can find a way.
Um, I wouldn't dismiss it out of hand. How about that?
Sure. Yeah, of course. I mean that is incredible that if when my kids are teenagers, if one of them wants to go, has any desire at all to go hiking for months at a time, whether I can make it or not, yeah, that's a proud moment right there.
Yeah.
Just that they would have that interest. I mean, so have you taken your kids wilderness backpacking? Like we all get our backpacks, we go for a couple days, things like
Ever
that?
since my son was 4, my daughter was 6. Yeah. Um,
Wow. That's another level. I mean, my kids aren't that into it. You know, no, I haven't done that with my kids, and I know I'm impressed with anybody who does because that takes so much planning, so much coordination, so much. I mean, I can't imagine, yeah, bringing my kids for something like that. We do car camping. We do a lot of car
yeah.
camping, but not the overnight. I mean, part of it is my wife doesn't camp at all. She doesn't really like camping, so it would be all on me.
Yeah.
Um,
The physical burden
yeah.
is for me the only challenge. It's not the planning. It's not,
Okay.
identifying something that would be reasonable for kids of whatever age they happen to have been to accomplish, make it challenging but fun. It was more, I'm going to carry 60 pounds in my bag, because
Yeah.
when they were that young, I wanted them to love it. And loving it meant that the trail meals we were eating had to be good, not
I understand.
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like not like nuts on a wrap with maybe a
Yeah.
smear of peanut butter,
Yes. Yes.
like we made like trail pepperoni pizzas, so like,
Oh my God. Yeah.
the stuff
No.
I never wanted them to be hungry. So I packed
Yeah.
so much extra food. So,
Yeah. And you
just the
carried
weight.
most
Yeah.
of their gear as
Yeah.
well, I'm sure.
My son, I
Man,
remember
impressive.
he carried like his little, school backpack, and the only thing I made him carry was like an extra pair of clothes. So that was
Right.
all he was carrying for the
Yeah.
first few years I was taking him and my daughter. Yeah.
I would say that's the way. I mean, if I were going to try to do it, I would understand that is the way I would have to try to do it. It would be I'm going to carry everything. I have to make this as pleasant and enjoyable for them as possible so that they don't have, horrible memories and say, I never want to do that again. So, but
Bingo.
that is really impressive that you took your kids wilderness backpacking when they were young. That's something that I was not in the cards for me. I'm like, no, no way. It's too much trouble. It's hard enough going car camping with them and remembering. It's not hard, but it's like this is enough of a challenge. Yeah, I'd like to think that I'm the kind of guy that could do that, but nah, I don't think I could handle it. I don't think I could do it.
You want to hear something funny? As all parents go through, things with their kids, you have a different, dad voice with your kids when you're disciplining them or when you're asking them to do something. And my daughter said something to me, I think it was after our second trip. She said something to the effect of, Dad, you're so different when we go backpacking. You're like way more relaxed and like way more fun, and I didn't think about it that way, but
Yeah,
I was never telling them to not do anything, right?
yeah,
I was never telling them to do anything in particular, other than like
right.
get your stuff together, let's go. You know, the wilderness was for being wild, as far as I was concerned.
Yeah,
And that spoke to kids. It spoke to my kids. So I think that's why they loved it more than anything. His dad was pretty chill, just let them do kind of whatever they wanted, without yelling at him about anything.
yeah. And so when we started this call here, when we started this episode, I instantly noticed your background and the official statement back there, and then you alluded to your job and career a few minutes ago. What do you do for a living?
Yeah. So currently I am the director of a regional public health department in Connecticut. So
Hmm.
my official title is director of health. Every city, county, state government has somebody like me, who directs their public health operations.
Hmm.
So,
So it's a government job, right?
it's a government job.
Hmm.
That's right. In Connecticut, I don't know how California is. Connecticut has no county government. There's no
Okay.
counties.
I
It's
don't
just
know. I
cities.
don't know anything about government, really, about
Okay.
local, state, county. I don't know
Where do
much.
you pay
You
your,
know a lot more than I do.
when you pay your taxes, who do you make your check out to?
Oh, um, well, we usually get a return.
Okay.
So
Okay.
somebody's making a check out to us, the state of
Okay.
California and the federal government. I know that. That's all I know.
That's it. You
That's
don't
all I
know if
know.
it's county or city. Uh, well,
Yeah.
so I work, it's a government job. It's director
Okay.
of public health operations. It's regulatory in some cases. Otherwise, it's like health promotion, health education,
Hmm.
housing code enforcement. But as the director, I'm just an administrator. It's budgeting, it's
Hmm.
strategic planning, stuff like that.
Hmm.
And before that, I was an epidemiologist for many years,
An
doing.
epidemiologist. Wait, a
Mhm.
doctor?
No, it's somebody who, studies infectious diseases, manages outbreaks of
Oh,
diseases,
oh.
you know.
Were you doing that pre-COVID or post-COVID?
I was doing that pre-COVID for about 10 years. And
Oh,
then about 6 months before COVID, I became the director here.
okay.
And I never really
Interesting timing
took
on
that hat
that,
off.
considering
Yeah.
your profession.
I was definitely questioning my life choices, about 6 months into the pandemic.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, let's get into your jujitsu journey.
Yeah.
How old were you when you started? What initially gave you the interest? Had you been interested for a long time? What got you into it? And yeah, let's start there.
So I started jujitsu in 2009. Um,
Hmm.
no, sorry, 2012, 2012.
Okay.
Um, I stumbled into it really. I would say a casual MMA fan, but that's not really what got me really interested in it. We live in like a small rural town in Connecticut, and there's a martial arts school. It used to be called America's Best Defense, Colchester, and we got my kids into, doing some. It was more karate, like a hybrid style of karate and kickboxing, that they taught kids. So both my kids started at this school, and then my wife started there, doing the same stuff. Sort of this hybrid karate, kickboxing, martial art. It had a belt system. It wasn't like points. It wasn't like Taekwondo. It was really self defense. Oh, also Krav Maga. So they did a sort of a hybrid of all those three self defense styles, and they started this deal where, if you had three family members who were taking classes, the fourth family member could train for free.
Okay.
And, I'd always been, again, like into wilderness backpacking, hiking and stuff like that. I tried my hand at running, but my knees didn't really agree with it. And I was weightlifting, but I was looking for something else. And since my whole family was doing martial arts, I was like, I'll try my hand at it. It's not going to cost me anything because they're running this special. But the scheduling was an issue. So the kids' classes took place at a certain time. Then the adult classes that my wife was taking would take place right after the kids' martial arts classes. So my kids were little. Somebody had to be home with them all the time. So I was staying home with them when my wife was taking her classes. The only classes available at this school were nighttime Brazilian Jiu Jitsu classes for adults.
Okay.
So if I was going to do martial arts for free at this school, it was Brazilian Jiu Jitsu or nothing.
I see.
So literally that was why I picked Jiu Jitsu, because it was available based on my schedule and it was free for me. So
available and of all the episodes I've done, I don't know that anybody has said that the reason they did it is something like that. Well, it just kind of worked out for my schedule, so I did it.
Yeah, that was it. And since I've been taking my kids to that school for their classes for a while, I knew the owner, I knew some of the instructors. I got a good feel for the vibe of the school in general. I stuck around sometimes to watch, people roll a little bit, when my schedule would allow, just to kind of see what it was all about. Because I talked to the owner, I was like, "Hey, I'm thinking about starting this up." He's like, "Well, just stick around and check it out." So I did a few times, and it looked crazy to me. I mean, I'll just be honest. It looked totally crazy to me. I couldn't tell what was going on. People would be like just rolling around on the mat, and then suddenly they would stop, and I was like, "What the hell happened?" I wouldn't see the tap, or I wouldn't hear anything. I didn't know anything about jiu-jitsu, so it looked totally crazy to me.
Yeah, I mean, you can still. I mean, even to this day, I've been training about a year and a half now. I mean, if I watch the like two black belts roll and then they suddenly stop, I often won't see what happened there.
Yeah.
So even with experience, that can happen. It's hard to notice things, little details.
So that was what got me started. And once I started, there were a couple things I really enjoyed that surprised me. One was like the camaraderie among the practitioners. They seemed to really, like each other, care for each other, be really supportive. It wasn't like we're competing against each other. It was more we're trying to help each other, learn this martial art, which I really liked. I got some weird like endorphin rushes that I wasn't expecting. And I only read up on this after I started experiencing this, but the physical closeness of jiu-jitsu, like your body against somebody else's body, even if they're trying to break your arm or choke you unconscious, right? When you feel safe, like you do when you're practicing at the right school with jiu-jitsu, when you feel safe and you have that like body contact with somebody else, it releases endorphins, similar to other types of physical, like intimate contact that you might have. So I found that to be like really interesting, that the good feelings I would have after jiu-jitsu were as a result of that, So that I really liked. And I really liked the intellectual pursuit. To me, jiu-jitsu seemed way more intellectual than any martial art than any other martial art that I could think of. People would just sit around and try to figure stuff out at the school that I was going to. there was always instruction. There would be themes that would last, a few weeks to a few months, but a lot of time was just spent on the intellectual pursuit of figuring out the sport. Um, and that was supported by the owner and the instructors. You know, they were never people who were like, "Oh, no, no, we're not doing that today," or "I'm not going to show you that right now. That's for another time. Stop that." They were just really supportive of everybody's sort of individual learning. And that scratched an itch for me. Like the intellectual pursuit of a martial art is where it's at for me. Um, Not the physical competition, not the winning, not the I know something cool and you don't. Like none of that does it for me. Um, it was the good feelings and the intellectual pursuit that stuck for me. That totally surprised me. I was like, I'll just try. Maybe it'll be something to like help keep me fit because I like lifting weights, but cardio was something I never really enjoyed.
Mm-hmm.
And so I needed something. I was like, oh, I'll get some, like maybe some physical fitness out of this and, maybe learn a cool martial art, whatever. And everything about what I thought it was going to be was not what stuck with me.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You said everything about what you thought it was going to be. So, what were some things that you thought it was going to be that it wasn't?
Yeah, I thought it was going to be competitive, learning how really to like disable an opponent, really hyper focused on self defense, which it is those things, but that wasn't what did it for me. So it did turn out to be, I guess, somewhat the things that I anticipated, but those things weren't what I enjoyed about it. That was what surprised me. Um, it, it was, it sort of flipped it up on it. It flipped it up on top of its head for me. Um, when I was little, I took karate. I sort of remember, you know, wanting to punch and kick stuff and wanting to like kind of hurt people in somewhat of a safe environment, learning how to hurt people, learning how to disable people. So like that kind of was a curiosity for me. And it's not that jujitsu wasn't that. It's just that's not what I ended up enjoying.
Man, there's so much to unpack there. Um, the yeah, so I have a similar story actually because I took Taekwondo as a kid 1 year, and I mean, this was the 80s or early 90s maybe. There was nothing else.
Yeah.
My dad was trying to get me to, I don't know, help me be able to kind of defend myself a little bit. And yeah, but it was not a good experience. I mean, it wasn't horrible, but it was not pleasant at all. Like the instructor was just plain mean. He was really mean and tough, and I didn't make one friend. I did it for like a year, and everything was just I absolutely hated it. So that kind of turned me off from martial arts in general. That was kind of my picture of it, and I knew, I always knew jujitsu was out there. Um, and yeah, I would say it sounds like you went to a great gym. It's the way you describe it, but I feel like that is the way a jujitsu gym is supposed to be. And it shouldn't be, with these days, it shouldn't be that hard for most people to be able to find a gym that has that kind of camaraderie, that has that kind of supportive community. There's multiple gyms in my area that are like that, including the one that I go to. I'm impressed with your actual research and reading about what is it. I guess at some point the endorphin rush thing kind of prompted you to do some reading. It's like, what is this
Hmm.
awesome feeling about this? Because I don't do a lot of reading and research, which I probably should get better at. But it's interesting you're touching on that because I was just having a conversation with another friend of mine. Um, Interestingly, he's the one that he's a friend that lives in Oregon and he has climbed Shasta. I've done a lot of hikes with him. He's the one I did the John Muir Trail with. His name's Buddy. So he has stumbled upon some episodes of this podcast, and he has, we were talking yesterday about it for the first time ever. After one of my episodes, he said, there's a gym down the street from my house. There's a chance I might give this a shot, based on my endorsement and the endorsement of a lot of my guests. And that endorphin rush you talk about, there's something I was trying to explain it to him because you get an endorphin rush from lots of different things, lots of different activities, right? Whether it's running or cycling or wilderness backpacking. I mean, this sense of satisfaction, right? And I was trying to explain to Buddy the unique endorphin rush from from rolling around, from rolling around with other people who And I was trying to explain to him by saying, it's like you're kind of trying to kill each other. I mean, when I tap, if you don't stop, you're either going to break my arm or uh, put me to sleep, kill me. I mean, you're putting a lot of trust in another person every time you roll, a lot of
Yep.
trust. And I think it's inevitable that that's gonna build a sense of camaraderie. But yeah, I couldn't have anticipated, at least for me, the camaraderie as well, but the power of it and how close I feel to so many of the guys I train with. There's a good, I mean, almost everybody at my gym, and my gym's getting really crowded now. Uh, but yeah, the sense of camaraderie is a really unique one. The bond that you feel, and yeah, my kids. Okay, so unfortunately, my son, he doesn't do it anymore. At least for now, he's taking a break because he joined a swim team, and the scheduling, it's just impossible to do 5 days a week of swimming. In addition to, it's just too much. He does 2 hours 5 days a week of swimming.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, we
It's a
can't
lot.
incorporate jujitsu. He did jujitsu for maybe about as long as I've done it right now. And of course, he started when he was like 9 or 10, and he's a kid. He learned so much faster than I did. I mean, so much faster. And I'm hopeful. Maybe you can touch on this. I'm hopeful that he will always retain some of the fundamentals, in terms, just for basic self defense and things like that. And I mean, it might sound kind of silly, but he still loves to, like, wrestle me all the time. That's like one of his favorite things to do. Even though
That's awesome.
he turns 12 today, and that's still, one of every single day he still wants to go to town wrestling with me. And I will notice how yesterday, or the day before yesterday, I noticed how annoyed I was when he wouldn't let go of my sleeve. Like, and he knows grip. He still, like, it taught him grips for sure, it's taken me a while. It's taken me a long time to really understand that that kind of thing is really, not only important for jujitsu, but that actually is pretty effective for self defense if somebody's wearing certain clothing.
Yep.
Because I was getting really irritated, and it clicked with me, like, holy crap, that's why he's doing that. And he's totally controlling my arm right now. And he's
Hmm.
12 and he's 70 pounds. But I literally, during the wrestling match, I'm like, I'm taking off my long sleeve. I don't want you to
Hey, like
have my sleeve
collars,
anymore.
collars and cuffs,
Right? Absolutely. So my daughter does it now. She's been going about a year, and she's going to keep it up for a while. And I think it's an important skill for just to have some of the basic foundation for basic self defense. And my episode that came out yesterday was with my cousin, who's also on the East Coast. He lives in New Hampshire, and he's in law enforcement, and he fully endorses jujitsu for self defense, like
Hmm.
fully. And he sees it on the job. He has used it on the job. He witnesses the power of it on the job. So it's nice to hear that. And your kids, how many years did they do it? Do they still do it?
They never did jujitsu.
Mm.
They never did jujitsu. They only
Terrible
did,
question.
yeah, they only did the stand up, karate, Krav
All right.
Maga. Every few sessions, they would incorporate some element of jujitsu, whether it was a takedown or how to control somebody on the ground, but
Okay.
never any submissions. They did not teach submission style jujitsu moves to kids at this school.
Okay.
Um, it was a comfort level thing for the owner. I don't know if it was also a liability thing. I don't know if that played into it. He always said it was a comfort thing for him. It wasn't because under Gracie Sports, which was Marcio Stambowski's brand, which was the master of all the schools in this area, Connecticut, really all over the state. Marcio teaches kids, so he wasn't
Hmm.
like, I don't endorse, teaching kids jujitsu. Not that at all. It was the owner of this particular gym.
And sorry, was he a black belt in jujitsu, the owner?
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Black belt in jujitsu. When my kids first started going there, I think he was like a 4-stripe brown belt, but then got his black belt subsequently.
Hmm.
Um, and so he just never taught kids. And again, his comfort level, I think he also never developed a comfort level with any other instructors to have them teach his kids
Hmm.
jujitsu. It was always had to be him for the most part.
Okay.
He taught all the jujitsu classes for a really long time until until he finally had a student that he trusted enough in jiu-jitsu to teach some other classes.
I see.
Um,
I see.
because jiu-jitsu in Connecticut was pretty new. I mean, even in 2012, like Marcio Stambowski, I think he only came to the United States, to Connecticut in like 2007, 2008.
Right.
And to hear the guy who owned my gym talk about it, when he got interested in jiu-jitsu, there really wasn't any jiu-jitsu schools in Connecticut, like zero that he could find.
Right.
So it was like him and his buddies, like watching videos and trying to figure stuff out themselves, you know.
Oh, geez. Okay.
That was how he got started in jiu-jitsu. So I
Okay.
think it took a while to sort of build the sport up locally in Connecticut. So when I started, it just really wasn't very common. It just wasn't.
Yeah, that's what my cousin was saying when I interviewed him. He started in, I think he said, 08 or something like that.
Mhm.
And there was only one black belt in jiu-jitsu in the entire state of New Hampshire at the time. And now there's 6 black belts that work in one police department in New Hampshire, right?
Yeah.
In one police department alone. So it's really it's really taken off. But the martial arts that your kids were learning, like the takedowns, the Krav Maga, how many years were they doing that?
Oh God. They did it. Both of them did it up until the pandemic of 2020. So from
Oh,
like
quite a few years.
yeah, so like 2011 until 2020. You know, my daughter got her black belt, her child black belt, and then she got an adult black belt.
Okay.
And my
And they were
son,
learning takedowns, and you said some
so
of the ground
the,
control stuff.
they would incorporate some elements of jujitsu into
Okay.
their stuff, but it was minimal. So
Mhm,
it wasn't every session. So a session would last like 3 months. They would have like these special themes, whatever they were working on.
Yeah.
And there might be an odd session where they would incorporate some takedown defense,
Okay.
and ground control.
Okay.
No submissions. So, and you know, when they would do that stuff, I was like all on board helping them. You know, we practice at home.
Yeah.
They'd ask me to show them, you know, some stuff that they weren't allowed to do. So, you know,
I bet.
I
I bet they
would. I'd be
did.
like, you know, promise, like you're not gonna, you know, roll out this armbar attempt, like when you know, take somebody down.
Right.
So they, you know, I think they enjoyed the jujitsu stuff, but not enough to say I'm going to start doing that now.
Right. Right. Interesting. Yeah. I mean, one of my biggest, I don't know, regrets, but like, is that I didn't try something like this sooner. I mean, I've only been going, a little over a year now. But that's one thing I wanted to give my kids is at least a little bit of experience in some basic self-defense techniques. And I always thought jujitsu would probably be the best thing. So, like I want them to be teenagers and kids in their 20s, relatively, at least more comfortable than I ever was, understanding kind of what to do if somebody wants to get physical with you. So, so it sounds like that many years for your kids, they're probably in a pretty good place for that, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the more years that go on without them training, obviously, you know, things fall off. But I think some parts of that will always be with them. They could start it back up, you know, when they start careers, you know, they're out of college, settle
Yeah.
down somewhere, start it back up. Maybe they take up jujitsu.
Right,
Maybe they
right.
introduce it to their kids one day because, you know, I think it was a big part of their lives
Yeah.
for quite a long time. I mean, they went, you know, 3 days a week
Yeah.
for like 9 years. It's
That's a long time.
a
That's a
really
really
long
long
time.
time.
There really weren't any
And that's the
breaks.
formative years. I feel like there's no way they won't uh, retain a lot of the probably more important fundamentals from a lot of that. So
Yeah. I mean, the
that's
fundamentals
awesome.
from Krav Maga are like, you know, groin strike, you know, eye gouge.
Sure,
You know,
why not?
Krav Maga is mostly about like disable your opponent in any way feasible and run
Yeah,
away. Yeah, that's Krav Maga.
yeah, yeah,
And some of that stuff I think will stick with them. You know, punch somebody in the groin if they're a male, you know, they're gonna collapse and you're gonna be able to get away. You know,
yeah,
gouge somebody's eye, you know, it only takes 4 pounds of pressure per square inch to gouge an eye. You know, that's the kind of stuff that sticks in their head probably. So
yeah.
yeah, I hope it sticks with them. If not the material, then the confidence.
That too. That's a big part of it for me as well. That I think is super important. But let's get back to your journey a little bit. I mean, you made it
Hmm.
to blue belt, which I got to be honest, like I've got one stripe on my little white belt, which I feel I barely deserve in the first place. I feel like I should probably give it back one of these days, but
You
or
get that
maybe they're gonna,
stripe and you're like,
or
Oh shit, everybody's looking at me now.
Yeah. And that,
Everybody,
but
everybody knows I'm a fraud.
exactly, exactly. I'm an imposter. I'm an imposter here,
Yeah.
imposter syndrome. But you made it to blue belt, and I mean, it'll be a miracle if I ever make it to blue belt someday. But I'm gonna be, I think I'm gonna be terrified if I make it, and I have to actually tie that thing on and walk into the place that first time. I'm gonna be scared. And I've heard, maybe you've heard the same thing. Blue belt is the hardest belt. A lot of people would say that's when they say all of a sudden all the white belts that you were a white belt with are gunning for you now, and all the black belts take the kid gloves off. They're not going easy on you anymore. How many years were you a blue belt? How far did you get, and did you have that kind of experience with it?
Yeah, so I was a blue belt for 3 years. I did get 4 stripes, so I was a hair's breadth away from getting my purple belt.
Seriously.
Um, and when I first walked out on the mat with my blue belt, I felt everything you just described. Um, I also felt like the other white belts that I've been training with came at me hard.
Oh my God.
It was more like, not only using your training, but every ounce of physical strength and will to,
Okay.
if to get you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then suddenly people started asking me questions, so like it was like people
Oh.
who were newer white belts,
Oh,
you
sure.
know, would come to me and be like, Russ, I'm struggling with this. Can you help me figure it out? And then suddenly I'm like, well, damn, I guess I got to have the answer.
And this kind of
Um,
happened overnight, huh?
it
Seemingly.
seemed like it. Yeah, it seemed like it.
Okay.
It seemed like it. And, I was always happy to try to help people figure some things out, but I made no, uh, proclamations that I knew everything and that I knew, even if they were asking me, I'm like, listen, I know what you're talking about. I know the struggle with this that you're talking about. And let's go see if we can figure this out because I remember some things, but I was never like, oh, that's a simple answer.
Yeah.
Because like nothing in jujitsu is a simple answer, right? You ask
No.
somebody, why can't I finish this choke? And it's like, well, like turn your wrist this way and,
Yeah.
shift your body weight that way. And it's like the smallest movements make
Right.
the finishing difference.
Right.
And as a blue belt, especially as a new blue belt, if I would watch somebody roll and they would show me what they were doing, yes, I had a blue belt, but I didn't have that knowledge, the knowledge to be able to see that their body weight was not in the perfect position or that their wrist wasn't turned perfectly. I know that those are the tricks, like adjust your wrist, adjust your body weight here, and move this leg that way, but I couldn't see it. I could regurgitate what I've been taught. I might be able to show you and finish you in certain ways,
Yeah.
but watching two people roll and seeing what they're doing wrong was not in my repertoire as a new blue belt. But
Uh-huh.
it was like expected. It seemed expected that I would be able to watch them, these two new white belts, do something and be like, "Oh, you got this all wrong. Here's what you're doing wrong." But that wasn't me. I didn't have that. Um, so yeah, it felt terrifying, for all those reasons. And then you just got used to it. That didn't take, honestly, it
Yeah.
didn't take that long to just get used to
Yeah.
it. Like anything, you just get used to it.
What about the black belts? You talked more about the white belts. What about the upper belts? Did you feel a big shift with them too when you put on that blue belt? Like, oh
So,
shit, they're going harder on me than they were before.
um, no, I actually felt like they took me under their wing a little bit more. So,
Oh.
um, we only had when I was training, at least initially, there was one black belt and it was the owner of the school. That was it.
Oh,
I was there
possibly
when
that's why.
yeah,
Okay.
when he gave his first student their brown belt. I was there. So, you know,
Right.
it was a new crop. There wasn't a lot of experienced jujitsu practitioners at the school or anywhere nearby, really. Um, so, it was like if I was under anybody's wing or being attacked, by anybody, they were a purple belt, and they were fairly new
Wow.
purple belts,
Right.
you know.
Right. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's just I keep forgetting that what this is like 10, 15 years ago that
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
talking
15
about
years ago
right now
almost.
in Connecticut. But I mean, 10, 15 years ago anywhere in the States, the density of black belts on a mat was so much lower than it is today, but probably more so in Connecticut. So yeah, for me it's like so we've got I mean my gym offers so many classes. There's a 6:30 a.m. class, there's a noon class, There's a 6 p.m. class and there's a 7:45 p.m. class.
All
I
jujitsu.
Yeah,
Wow.
and I go to the 7:45 p.m. class because that's the intro class, and I'll be going to that for a while. But and that's mostly white belts, a couple blue belts, and we're talking. I mean, this place is busy. Like there's 40, 50, 60 people there in one class, and we have a ton of instructors though as well. Many black belts, handful of brown belts. But the morning class, I'll go to that class when my schedule permits. I'm a teacher, so in the summers and winters I can go there, and just because I love getting it out of the way. But that morning class, I'll be one of maybe 2 or 3 white belts, and those 2 or 3 white belts have usually 2, 4 stripes, and then there's maybe 1 or 2 blue belts, and maybe 10 black belts or
Wow.
something. Yeah.
Wow.
So when I I guess when I say when I put on that blue belt, I'm picturing the first time I have a blue belt on in that morning class. That's probably gonna be really scary for me. Like I mean I don't think they're gonna like hurt me, but yeah, I'm worried about the whole okay, the kid gloves are off now. And so you're wearing that blue belt, time to uphold it, and I'll do my best. But I'm scared. It's a
I
long
don't
way off
know.
for me though, you know.
Like, what's the culture like in that school? Is it focused on competition? Do they emphasize competition? Um, is it because I've traveled to a few different schools. Whenever I could, I would bring my gi with me when I would travel for work and find a school. And my first impression was like, oh, all schools are going to be the same, like jiu-jitsu schools. But they're not. There are some schools out there that focus on intensity and competition,
Hmm.
and above all else. There was one school I visited in Atlanta when I was traveling down there that they separated the white belts from everybody else. White
Hmm.
belts trained with only white belts and a black belt instructor, and everybody who had a color belt was like in another part of the gym. Same class, same time, whatever. Um,
What was the reason for that?
I didn't have the courage to ask, to be honest.
Okay.
I don't know if it was a safety thing because white belts
Okay,
do
sure.
stupid shit and hurt
Yeah,
people. You're right. They use
yeah,
like brute strength and they're trying to overpower you and like that can lead to injury. I don't know if it was that or if it was just we're going to be focusing on details that as a white belt we don't even want to confuse you with that level of detail. You know,
yeah.
and sometimes there is that, right? When you see a couple upper belts working on stuff together, they're focusing on details that you're like, I don't even know which hand I should use for this. And you're talking
Oh,
about
yeah.
like your pinky goes here.
Yeah.
So, so,
I don't know
so
if
I
I'm supposed
think,
to push or pull,
right,
Yes.
right. I don't know where I am in space in this moment.
Yes,
You ever
yes.
have those times where like you're rolling around, you don't even know which way is up.
Yep.
So yeah, for whatever reason, they separated white belts from,
Okay.
and the white belts trained in this one school that I went to harder and with more intensity than I had ever trained before.
Okay.
Um, and they had a lot of trophies and they had a lot of stuff that showed how many competitions they had won.
Okay.
Um, and so I think the culture was a little bit different. So I think depending on the school you go to, like you put on that blue belt, you know, in that school, you put on a blue belt, you go and train with the other color belts, you're still the junior most person there. And they might still treat you with kid gloves, right?
Okay.
Because you're a blue belt and everybody else is upper belt.
Right.
Um, so I don't know about different cultures like that are different for.
One thing I'm curious about now that you're talking about it, and sorry, you did ask me a question at the beginning of that, but we'll
Yeah,
get to
about
that.
your culture,
Uh,
yeah.
right. Um, yeah. So, okay, let's start there real quick. I mean, the culture at my gym is, it's, uh, I would say, yeah, there's plenty of people there who compete. There's a lot of people there who compete, but, and it kind of depends on which class you go to. Like, I've never been to the noon class, and I've heard that that is, almost exclusively for competitors, and it's one of the more intense classes to go to. I've never been. But I mean, no matter what class I've been to, it's been warm and welcoming every time I go, whether it's purely black belts or whether it's like 80% black belts or almost all white belts like the night class. There's a lot of, I guess part of the reason for me even starting this podcast is I've been so amazed by how many dads whose kids started and then they decided, you know what, I'm going to start, dads in their late 30s or early 30s, 40s like me. And so there's a huge supportive group of dads who are some of whom compete, some don't. Um, And so it just kind of, I guess it kind of depends on the crowd. But yeah, a lot of people at my gym, yeah, there's still plenty of people that I know of who compete internationally. And they're big on the competition. And we have the guy who runs our gym. His name is Jiva Santana. You can Google him. He was in MMA. He's known as the Arm Collector. He has an incredibly extensive Jiu Jitsu and MMA record. Um, but he's the nicest guy you could ever meet. Like, and that's one thing that has blown me away about my gym. That I didn't even know who he was when I started, but people told me, and I'm like, oh my god! But he knows everybody's name. There's hundreds of kids that go to that school. He knows everybody's name. He knows every adult's name. The hundreds of adults that are there. He takes a personal interest in every single person, and it's no matter like the vibe is so enjoyable. Like there's a lot of just like lighthearted humor all the time, a lot of ribbing, a lot of teasing, but
Hmm.
at the same time, hey, we're here to learn something serious. Let's get serious now. But I mean, open to questions. I mean, it's yeah. I mean, I love my school. It's awesome. But one thing I'm curious about is like, the difference. There's no something we've been talking about lately on this podcast is there's no like agreed upon standards across the jujitsu world for a person who gets a blue belt should be able to do these things. A person who gets a purple belt should be able to do these things. So that just genuinely confuses me about the whole thing. How does any instructor ever decide, you know what, it's time for that guy to get his blue belt, that time for that guy? So when I'm curious for you, you went around to different gyms. When you were wearing that blue belt at these other gyms, did you feel like, oh, a blue belt means something entirely different here? And I don't mean so much like, okay, the blue belts, like that, what you just described, the colored belts are over here, the white belts are over here, but more like, oh, wow, a blue belt means something more here or something different here. Yeah. Could you touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, I did notice that.
Hmm.
So the I felt the difference when I would roll with blue belt in different places. Um, the whether it was and it was hard for me to tell whether it was because they were being taught different things,
Oh, yeah, right. There's that too.
right? Like different styles. Like somebody might really love, you know, De La Hiva, and like, they got five different ways to kill you from one position, and they just did it last week. For me, I could never tell if blue belt meant a different level in terms of breadth of knowledge, skill set, ability to do things, um, versus this place just their style's a little bit different. They like to focus on, oh, they do mostly no gi, or they do only gi, or, um, what I noticed is sometimes like if the instructors were smaller guys versus bigger guys, the
Right.
styles would be different, because as a
Right.
bigger
Right. Right.
guy, you never know, you're almost never on bottom. You might
Yeah.
not find yourself practicing it that much. You got to deliberately put yourself in certain situations to get better at it if you're not naturally there just because of your size. So, so I could never tell if it was a standard that was
Uh
different,
huh. Uh
or
huh.
if it was just simply style and experience that was different in the teaching. I have this knowledge, I'm going to pass it on to you, and then you're going to have this knowledge, and it's a little bit different. There might be a lot of overlap, but it's going to be a
Hmm.
little bit different than this school. um, so that was kind of my experience. And even locally under Marcio's brand, when I would go to different schools, the different instructors would have different approaches to belts. So in one school, this guy Charlie, I went to his school a lot. He's in Norwich, Connecticut. Um, he had Before he would consider you at blue belt, you had to do a certain volume of different moves, and you had a checklist. So you had to pass guard in this particular way 50 times. You had to do certain things a certain number of
How would they
times.
even keep track of that though? Like, was there a
Not
log book?
You had a logbook that it was on the honor system. You had a logbook yourself that
Oh,
like you would go, and it was a super long checklist, right, of all
yeah,
these different things.
yeah.
So that was the way he handled it. And then
Mm-hmm.
he would
Mm-hmm.
evaluate you. And then
Okay.
he would invite Marcio, the master over all these schools, if he thought you were ready, he would then invite Marcio to come and take a look at you. And he wanted Marcio to be the one that gave everybody their belt.
I see.
So for him, like lineage was important. So he was like, here, you got to know all these things. You got to document that you've done it so many times. Then I'm going to evaluate you. Then I'm going to have Marcio evaluate you. And if he agrees and I agree, then he's going to give you your new belt. So
Hmm.
that was one way. The one school that I went to quite a bit. I split my time quite a bit between that school in Norwich and the school in my town. Um, and the school I went to in Colchester, I had no idea how they evaluated you. I mean, to
Hmm.
this day, I have no clue. It would just be I could tell when my instructor was considering me for either a stripe or a belt because he would start rolling with me a lot. You know,
Oh, okay.
so
Yeah,
like
and
at
that's
the
how
end,
he's evaluating you then. He's
yes,
testing you.
exactly at the end of the class,
Uh-huh.
he would be like, Russ, let's roll.
Hmm.
So when he started calling me out to roll like that on a regular basis, I was like, okay, I'm getting
Yeah.
close to whatever his standard is up here. I'm getting close,
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. I've rolled with the instructors a handful of times, and as of right now, I can't imagine a day in my life where I will ever feel like any difference at all in rolling with somebody at that level. You know what I mean? Like I can't
uh-huh.
imagine even the day. I mean, it's like, is it really possible that I'll be wearing a black belt someday, and then, as those days come, that when I roll with Jiva or Wellington, the other main instructor at our school, that I'll actually feel any different from when I was a white belt rolling with them? Did you feel the improvement when you would go against somebody at that level?
Yeah, but it was like really incremental,
Okay, sure.
so like he would, if I got called out after class, 5 times in a row, for example, I started to learn a little bit about my instructor's preferences.
Aha. Okay.
And, they might have a world of knowledge up here that dwarfed like my pea-sized knowledge, right, of jujitsu, but everybody has their preferences and everybody has their go-tos in different situations, even black belts. Um,
Right.
so I learned over time some of his favorite setups for different things from different positions. I couldn't necessarily always stop them, but I would
Right.
call them out in my head like, oh, here's where he's going. And sometimes I'd be right. So like,
Yeah.
but he would still finish me. And I'd be like, damn, I knew you were going here. I
Right.
knew you were baiting me with this arm. And I still couldn't stop it.
Yeah.
But just having those moments of clarity
Hmm.
clued me into my advancement, relative to the upper belts.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, every once in a while I would escape something and, could count on one hand like the times I actually finished somebody with a different color belt, than me. But literally,
Right.
like, I would remember it for a year. Like, remember that time.
Yeah.
But, but so yeah, you will notice. I remember noticing, and I remember it actually made me feel amazing. When
Sure.
I would even recognize something they were trying to do to me one or two moves ahead,
Uh-huh.
right? Not like,
Uh-huh.
oh, he's taking my arm now, he's going to armbar me, but like 2 moves ahead, I would feel the setup coming. That those
Yeah.
moments I'm like, oh shit, I'm kind of getting it now. Um, but that was incremental, right? Like
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was.
That's the nature of this sport though. It's so freaking hard. Like
Mhm.
every little step, learning any little step, feeling any sense of improvement at all takes at least it seems like I'm not alone here. It feels like it takes forever to feel like you're getting any better at all. Did you so speaking of, I mean, did you ever feel, were there times when you felt discouraged? Were there classes where you went home and you were like, geez, I thought I was better than that? Because I go through that sometimes. I feel like a lot of us do. But how did you keep your head up in general, like when you were, as a white belt, blue belt?
Yeah. I mean, I imagine it's like other martial arts, but jujitsu has a way, I think, very uniquely of making you feel very small. Um,
Yeah.
right.
I was
You
wondering
know,
what word you were going to use there, but yes, I would
s-
agree.
small, not just in physical stature, but mentally and, emotionally, I had moments where I would walk out of the gym feeling like I hadn't learned anything that whole class, and that I had forgotten everything I'd been working on for like 2 months. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
I got to a point where I was training jiu-jitsu where like I would identify a weakness in my game, and I would really try to focus on it. And obviously not during the instructional portion of class, but rolling afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I would have breakthroughs. Like you probably had a breakthrough where like you see something, right? You see the armbar coming and you get it, right? So I would have breakthroughs, but then there would
I
be
don't have
those.
any of those, but you know,
No,
a
okay,
breakthrough for me is, hey, I kind of am getting slightly better at maybe sort of, you know, not getting swept.
okay,
Like that's it. There's no like, hey, I can armbar people now.
yeah,
I'm just putting it in perspective for
okay.
me.
So I don't know how long you've been training. So I guess the thing is you'll have a moment where
Okay.
you see something before it happens and you'll nail it.
Okay.
Okay. And you'll feel amazing. And so, when I would work on things, I would work on, specific elements of my game,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes very small. But then I would go and especially if I would go to a different gym, like I went to this place in Norwich a lot, like I said, if I would go there and try to sort of deploy some of the things that I've been working on, with a different group of students, um, and I would fail miserably, I would walk out of there feeling so dejected. Like, damn, what did
Okay.
I just spend like 3 months, 3 days a week, and some Saturdays, like working on to get better? How could I fail so badly?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I guess I just kept going. It wasn't like, I didn't let it, I didn't let it stop me from going, because everybody I trained with who was more experienced than me must have gone through the same thing. And, they kept going. The only thing that ever stopped me from going, it was getting injured. That was it. It was not feeling a certain way about my
Mm-hmm.
game. It was not, certainly nothing about the other students I was training with. Um, there was one time where like the owner invited this guy who had kind of been a student for a while to lead some classes. I think it was like Wednesday nights, and that guy was brutal. He was like a killer. He was all about crushing the will out of your opponent, and I just didn't like that style. I didn't like the way he taught.
Mm.
He made me go to the other gym more. Like I was like, oh, I'm
Oh,
not
is
coming
that
here.
right?
Yeah, I'm like, I'm
Okay.
not coming here on Wednesday nights. I'm going to the other gym more. And eventually he got fired because he just wasn't
Really?
teaching. Yeah, I guess a lot of the students complained to the owner, like, hey man, he's kind of violating a lot of the principles that you've been teaching us. Not the physical moves per se, but the principle of why we study this martial art. He was more about like, crushing your opponent, doing damage.
Yeah.
Um, so once he left I came back more often, but no, it was the injuries the injuries is the only thing that kept me from jiu-jitsu. Otherwise, I just loved it. I just loved it.
Mm-hmm. And the injuries, and I know you eventually stopped, and it was because of a major, I think a major injury prompted it,
Hmm.
right? But what was the big injury? How old were you when you stopped? Was it hard for you? Did you see it coming? Were you like, I've probably got another year left or so of jujitsu, or was it? Yeah, how did it all that go down?
So I blew my knee out, tore my MCL, meniscus.
How'd it happen?
I was in top position. Um, I went to slide into an armbar by pivoting on my one leg. My opponent had grabbed my foot, not like this, but sort of like this, grabbed my
Mm-hmm.
foot as I went
Mm-hmm.
to pivot around to land the armbar. So my
Mm-hmm.
foot stayed planted. The rest of my body pivoted and my knee popped.
Ouch! And you felt it right away?
I heard it right away.
Okay.
It didn't actually feel bad. So I kept training that day. You know,
Oh.
I heard a pop.
Okay.
Um, the guy who I was training with immediately let go, because
Yeah.
he heard it, right? And I was like, "Oh, you heard that?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "You okay?" I'm like, I don't know." So I went out to the side. I like felt my knee with my hand as though I could feel something, like
Yeah.
not that
Right.
you injure your knee, you're ever going to feel anything, but like that was just the thing I was doing. I was like,
Yeah.
feels okay. You know,
Yeah. Yeah.
I bent it back and forth, like it
Oh,
felt okay.
good to go. Yeah.
I went
Get
back out of
back
the
in
mat,
there.
you
Yeah.
know, finished my session, right? So that night I come home and I sit on the couch, you know, my endorphins are running. So, you know, I would come home and I would just be a chatterbox with my wife, like
Yeah.
chatter, chatter, chatter. And she's like half asleep, you know, on the couch, right? Because
Yeah.
she's been sitting and watching TV for an hour and a half since the kids went to sleep. And because jiu-jitsu class at night would end at 9.
And hey, everybody. Sorry, we had some technical difficulties. So, Russell, you were in the part of your story where you were on the couch
On the
and you were a
couch.
chatterbox.
Yep. Chatting away because my endorphins are running high. I rested my left leg on top of my right leg as I do to casually, you know, just laying back on the couch. And I felt my knee like separate in a way that wasn't natural.
Oh, God, dude. It's like turning my stomach right now.
Yep. Yep.
And it was
So,
that moment when you knew
yep.
something, that pop was worse than, oh my God. So did you go straight to the ER? Did you make an appointment?
No, I mean it was like 10 o'clock at night at that point. It was late, you know. So the next morning, you know, I woke up and my knee had swollen up a little bit. Still wasn't terribly painful, but you know, clearly there was some damage. So I made an appointment to see the orthopedist. Got an MRI. They gave me the diagnosis.
You were able to walk around and stuff? Like it wasn't that so
Yeah,
bad that you couldn't
it was
move?
not. I could walk around. That was not. It was not that bad. And a lot of knee injuries are that way. You know,
Yeah.
you could
Yeah.
tear all the ligaments in your knee, so long as you're not doing any dynamic, you know, athletic movements. You know, walking around is fine. My daughter, she just tore her ACL in a climbing accident. Tore her ACL, her
Oh my
MCL, her
gosh.
meniscus, and yeah, that was in December. It was not just. It was in December. Um, she walked around on it for a couple months before she had surgery.
Okay.
So, you know, I think I learned that about knees, you know, is that like there's structural components to the knee that keep it stable, but don't necessarily diminish its normal function, you know, if they're damaged. Um,
Right. Okay.
Bending, you know, basically moving, walking was okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
At that point, because like I said, you know, my first and continued love and passion is wilderness backpacking. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I'd been through a bunch of injuries in jiu-jitsu, and I told myself if I ever injured my lower legs,
Mm-hmm.
that I would have to consider stopping because I didn't want anything to get in the way of my wilderness adventures, and more importantly, like doing that with my kids. You know, because
Yeah.
at that time I was still trying to get them into the outdoors, and I didn't want that to
Mm.
be put in jeopardy.
That's big.
Yeah. So for me, it was like it was different. It was either continue with jujitsu or acknowledge that I might not be able to like do these things that I love and pass that love on to my kids.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, the choice was not, it wasn't even close, man. It wasn't even
Okay.
close.
Okay.
It might have been different if I didn't have kids, you know, if I
Sure.
wasn't trying to get my kids into wilderness backpacking, and
But
adventurous
at what point did you
sports.
make the decision? Was it as soon as you got the MRI? Was it as soon as you met with the orthopedic surgeon and he told
It
you what the deal
was
was?
it was as soon as I met with the orthopedic surgeon. So I got the MRI, then we met. He told me the diagnosis, he told me the prognosis, he told me the options between surgery and no non-surgical options. And I asked him about, you know, future jiu-jitsu, and he said, um, I tell all my patients they shouldn't be doing that. This was what he said,
That they shouldn't be doing
that they
jujitsu.
shouldn't be doing jiu-jitsu. He said he said among between that and running, you know, he said, I see more injuries from wrestling, jujitsu, and runners than anything else.
Uh-huh.
So, and jujitsu is like wrestling, right? So he just said, and he lumped it in with all martial arts, but he really was
Yeah.
talking about jujitsu. He said, you know, you're really focusing on joint manipulation as a practice.
Yep.
And he's like, the only people that should be doing that are chiropractors. So I said,
Wow.
okay, you know, I kind of get it, but I said, if I go back, am I going to re-injure it? And he gave me a like a qualitative, you know, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he said, you know, like if you do surgery and you get it all put back together and the surgery is successful, you know, then those constructs are really, really strong and really stable. And no, you know, you shouldn't have any problems, no more so than you would have otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
He said, if you choose non-surgical option, which he recommended, no surgery for my MCL, my meniscus.
Is that right? I didn't know that was a
Yeah.
thing. I thought you had to
Yeah.
have surgery on that.
ACL, you don't have to have your knee ligaments surgically repaired or reconstructed at all. Scar tissue will eventually build up, and you just have to deal with the fact that you're a little less stable than you were. Um,
Okay.
but the MCL in particular heals pretty nicely without surgery.
Okay.
But he said if you opt not to go for surgery, which I recommend, because surgery can help, but it can also make things worse, and you can lead a life of repeated surgeries if things go south.
So did you end up getting the surgery
I did not get surgery. No,
at all? So
zero surgery.
so hold on. The injury was to your MCL, you said,
Yes, MCL.
and that's a ligament. And you
Correct.
was it torn?
It was torn. Yep, it was torn
And does
through.
it? Sorry. So does it rebuild itself, or you just don't need it unless you are going to do?
So,
You know.
yeah, he explained that the MCL, the scar tissue will build up and essentially replace the stability aspect that the MCL provided. Not 100%, but pretty close.
Okay.
And that's proven true. Like I don't feel any looseness in my knee anymore.
Okay.
It's fine. ACLs, they never repair. You know, when you tear an ACL, like you're either having it surgically repaired or you are going to have stability issues in that knee forever.
Right.
So yeah, it was that I didn't want to have surgery if I didn't have to.
Of course.
And I didn't want to give up or threaten the thing that I love most.
Mm-hmm.
But it was hard. It was hard to give up jujitsu. Like what I missed, like the camaraderie, you know, I miss just being out there with those people. I miss the endorphins. I miss the intellectual pursuit, like all those things. I missed and I still miss, you know, and when I see the guys that I used to train with, you know, which I'm still friends with some of them, they're still constantly trying to get me to go back out there, you know,
I bet.
constantly. Like it's like the first thing they bring up, you know, when are you coming back, you know, and it's been like 6 years, you know?
Yeah.
So, it didn't feel good to do it, but I don't regret my decision because I had a series of injuries. That was just the most significant. I separated my shoulder. I tore I think it's the acromioclavicular joint right there.
Oh yeah, that one.
Yep.
I'm just kidding. I've never.
Right.
That was quite a word you threw, but okay.
When you hear people say I separated my shoulder,
yeah,
that's what that means. You separate the AC joint, acromioclavicular joint.
Okay.
Where the acromion, this piece back here, connects to your scapula and your collarbone, where they connect. There's like a ligament there.
Yeah.
And I tore that. You know, I was rolling with this guy, Scott Poirier, really nice guy. Not too long ago, died of some kind of rare blood cancer, but super good guy. But I was like 170 pounds. He was like 250 pounds. I was, you know, trying to shrimp out a position. So I was on my side on the mat. He kind of leapt up on me, compressed this shoulder into the mat, and boop, pop. You know, same thing, snap, crackle, pop. I separated my rib cartilage, which is pretty common in jiu-jitsu. You probably know a lot of guys who separated their rib cartilage.
I have, yeah.
Yeah.
I've already done it, yeah.
Yeah. Separated my rib cartilage. I dislocated 3 toes.
And this was over the course of how many years?
This was over the course of 6 or 7 years.
Okay.
So I was like averaging what I would call a significant injury, even though a toe is not that big a deal, I guess. Like it sets you back, you know, you can't train with dislocated toes. So, yeah, over like close to 7 years, the 2 major ones, separating my shoulder, blowing out my MCL. Those are the 2 biggest ones. The toes, the rib cartilage. I could have gone work through that. Those were minor setbacks that were more annoying. I just started wearing like mat socks to protect my toes. If I took my shoe and my sock off, I'd show you my toes. They're like unnaturally long.
That's what happens when you dislocate your toes. They get longer.
No, I have unnaturally long toes.
Oh,
and it makes them more subject to dislocations.
I see. Would not have known that.
Yep. You wouldn't know that unless I showed you my toes. You'd be like, wow, you've got like Russ has monkey feet.
Okay.
But so for me, it was not just the accumulation of injuries. It was the major ones that really threatened my lifestyle outside of jiu-jitsu that I just wasn't willing to accept.
Yep. Were you hoping, like when you were a white belt, blue belt, and you were really getting into it, were you hoping to make it a black belt?
Yeah. I didn't see any reason why I wouldn't. The schools that I was training at were they really treated it like the gentle martial art that it is. You know, and it wasn't super intense. It wasn't super competition focused. the injuries that happened to me were not a result of somebody, taking it too far, right? Not respecting a tap out, or things like that. Like it was not for that reason. And so, yeah, I didn't see any reason why I wouldn't advance and keep training today. Some of the guys that I trained with that were my age, one guy's a brown belt. We started as a white belt together.
Wow.
So, the only difference, and you've heard this, the only difference between a white belt is in a black belt is, black belt's a white belt that never quit.
I've heard that.
It's just time. And they really preached that. It was, so I didn't see why I wouldn't get there.
Sure.
It wasn't that, like, again, the intellectual pursuit wasn't too much for me. It scratched that itch. I liked learning new things. I liked practicing new things. I liked working on an element of my game that I chose, right? I'm choosing this. Yeah, you're teaching me all this stuff. I'm going to learn that too, but I'm choosing to work on this. I loved that, like the sort of independent approach that you could take to your style of jiu-jitsu was great. I mean, you've probably, I don't know if you've got that yet in your head, the things that you like, the things that you have taken to, the things that you really want to work on, and whether or not your school gives you the sort of the room to grow in those ways on your own. But my school did, and I just loved it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I have probably gotten there, but I mean, there's no part of my game that I feel like, oh, I don't need to work on that anymore. Or that part of my game is so advanced that, well, I can just table that for now. There is no such part of my game other than oddly half guard is just kind of it just kind of, I still to this day remember the very first half guard lesson, and it was probably a year ago, and he was just showing us here's where you put this hand, grab the collar with this hand and then grab the sleeve with the other. And I remember to this day that was like the first lesson ever where I was like, oh, this is kind of comfortable almost, like.
Uh-huh.
And then I noticed pretty quickly that I kind of took to it a little quicker than my cohort. I'm not saying I was better at it. I just kind of liked it more, and it's become something that's part of the problem. I default to it more often than I should, because I really need to be, as I talked about with a guest last week, this dentist, Dr. Rob I had on. It's like you got to like get out of your comfort zone a little more. And it's like, I feel silly that I'm a one stripe white belt and I already have a comfort zone. I shouldn't have that yet. I really need to kind of say, forget the stupid half guard, just try spider guards, try this, try that. So yeah, I guess one thing you mentioned there that is just reminding me of a kind of a question I had for you. It's like, yes, I do. There's certain things that I try to focus on. Versus like, okay, here's the lesson of the day, and I should really at least attempt to incorporate that. But I mean, it's all still kind of just this wild storm of things going on. It's hard to try to focus on one thing at all in this sport. But I mean, I'm trying. I'm definitely trying to do that, but it is really hard to do.
At a certain point, I think. Like you have already found half guard to be sort of a natural fit for you. Maybe that'll end up being, that thing that you get really, really good at. It doesn't mean you don't get good at other things. Doesn't mean you ignore the lesson you're being taught that week or that session or whatever. But if you ever show up just to roll, do you ever show up to class just to roll? Like you don't show up for the instructional part. You just show up at the end to kind of roll with the guys. No,
okay. That's not really a thing at our gym. If you show up for the whole class. So that was okay at your gym? You could just pop in at the end of class and just roll?
Yep. And they would have plenty of open mats too, where you would just show up to roll and work on whatever. Open mat was a good time to do that. But yeah, you could just show up at any point. You just roll at the end. I really like De La Hiva. For me, it was like one of those things that felt good and not a lot of people were doing. Half guard never worked in my head, and it wasn't always a thing. Like half guard was like, I feel like the whole, like, getting submissions from half guard or sweeps from half guard is a relatively new jujitsu, like sporty jujitsu thing. It's not really a good place to be doing self-defense from.
Right. Unfortunately.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. It's like you don't want to be like, I'm gonna be in half guard. Like, oh, this guy's trying to attack me. Just wait until you get into my half guard.
Yeah,
Like,
that's not going to happen.
it's
That's
not
not
gonna
going to
happen,
happen.
right?
That's not a
You know,
thing. No.
right. They just like punch you in the face over and over. But
Yeah.
there, the finding the things that you like. For me, it was one of those things that, especially as a white belt and then new blue belt, if I was good at something, it kept me going.
Yeah.
If I was this much better at something than somebody else,
Yeah.
it felt like I was getting somewhere.
Yeah.
And so that's why I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. It's not like you ignore everything else.
No.
For me, it was just like, oh, this felt natural. I really like this. I'm going to keep doing this after this session. Like we did a whole session on De La Hiva. Great.
Yeah.
Everybody learned a few things from De La Hiva. Then we moved on to something else. And it wasn't like I stopped coming to class, but after class, I was still doing De La Hiva,
Okay. Yeah.
So for me, it was like trying to develop something I really liked.
Yeah.
Because every seminar I ever went to, it was like somebody coming to do a seminar on this, right? Like Henry Akins, I went to a seminar with that guy, and his whole seminar was on guard passing, and he would just line up all the best belts and he would just pass all their guards like they weren't even there. And,
Wow. So when
and
you say a
he's,
seminar, it sounds like he was just showing off his amazing guard passing. I mean,
but
I'm just kidding. It's like, was he teaching you how? Like it
yes,
was
of
like,
course. Yeah,
here's my
absolutely.
skills. Okay.
Yes, and he was focusing on these tiny details that you would have never thought.
Okay.
And he was like a Hickson Gracie black belt. So that guy was like amazing, Henry Akins. But for me, it was always like, oh, like there's a lot of people out there who specialize in something. They're
Yes.
really good
Yes.
at this. They're really good at that. And it's because it clicked with them early on, I
Yeah.
think, and they just kind of kept at it. It's
Right.
not because they came back to it every so often and it just sort
Yeah.
of fit. They
Yeah.
focused on it.
Yeah. This is and we've been going a while. I'm going to get to the lightning round here in a minute, but yeah, just one last word on that. It's like that's still something that I'm kind of getting used to the idea of. That's been a big surprise for me about jiu-jitsu. I didn't know that, that you can get good at this or have a purple belt, brown belt, black belt and not be good at everything. I thought you had to be good at everything. I didn't know that that was possible. And I remember one of my first times I was on a Saturday class and there's a lot of higher belts there. And I happened to be partnered up to drill with like a brown belt. And we were learning the drilling was something about a triangle or something. And he made the comment, I'll never forget. He just said, triangle. I suck at triangles. And I was like, what do
And
you
you're like, what do you
suck
mean
at
you're a brown
triangles?
belt?
You're a brown belt. And he was like, yeah, that's just not one of my things. I've done it like one time. And I was that from that moment, I'm like, what? And then I learned slowly, you can get good at this sport and not be good at everything. You can get just good at something. So trying to figure out, I just want to be good at one thing.
Yeah.
I'll take it,
Yeah. We'll focus on that one thing, right? Whatever
Yeah.
feels natural, right? Like that's,
Yeah.
you get good at it, practice it, whatever.
Yeah. So lightning round. Have you ever tapped to pressure?
No,
Oh, good for you.
No.
I have.
no.
You made it all that
I'm,
far. You never did.
I'm super stubborn. I had to think
Okay.
about it. I'm super stubborn.
Okay.
Super stubborn. If it's not going to injure me, I'm not going to tap. Or if it's not going to choke me unconscious, I'm not going to tap.
Good for you. I think I've already tapped to pressure a few times.
Yeah, no.
Most satisfying submission.
First time I submitted a brown belt, and the only time I submitted a brown belt.
Oh, and you were a blue belt at the time, I take it? Don't tell me you were a white belt.
So I was a blue belt. I was a pretty new blue belt, and he was a brand. He got his brown belt the same night I got my blue belt.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that night that I submitted him. It was
Okay.
like a couple weeks later in class. Actually, you know what? So I tapped him out. He tapped out to my pressure. I didn't
Okay.
submit. I don't want to say it was not a submission. He
You don't
tapped
count it,
out.
right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. He tapped. Now I was really close to a submission, and he was feeling miserable.
What was the submission that you were
It was
going
like
for?
a triangle from top position.
Okay.
So like it's got to be one of the most miserable feelings to be getting triangled while somebody's crotch is like right in your face on top of you.
Yeah.
I think he couldn't breathe well, and I was really
Okay.
close, so he tapped, and I
Okay.
was like, "Holy shit!" That was the most satisfying, even though it wasn't really a submission.
Oh, yeah. That's awesome, though. Play guard or pass guard?
Play guard. I'm a smaller dude. I know it's the worst thing for like, real life self-defense.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody's trying to
Mm-hmm.
attack you. You don't like drop to your back and be like,
Yeah.
come on.
Yeah.
Uh,
Right. Right.
but play guard,
Okay. Pull guard or takedown?
pull guard because I value my knees. Hate takedowns. Always feel like it's vulnerable. Makes your lower extremities vulnerable. Hate them.
Gotcha. Last one. If you returned to jiu-jitsu tomorrow, what would be the first thing you'd work on?
Injury avoidance.
Yes. Yes, I get it.
um, no, really, the first thing I would work on would be top position. For
Okay.
me, it was like I would come back to some basic holding top position, submissions from mount. Um, that was always a thing that I was weak at because as a smaller guy, I wouldn't find myself in top position that often, and when I
Mm-hmm.
would, it would struggle to keep it. And I know it's all about leverage, and there are strategies to deploy even against a larger, stronger opponent to keep you there, but it is still really hard, and nobody will tell you otherwise. So for me, it would be, getting back on top. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I, you keep mentioning it, and I don't even. I've never actually met you face to face. You keep saying you're a smaller guy. What do you? What weight do you walk around at? How tall are you?
Yep. 5'9", 170 pounds.
Okay, you're. I'm about the same height, but you've got about 15 pounds on me. So
Okay.
smaller guy as
Okay.
well. I get
So you're
it.
a smaller guy, so you know what I'm
Yeah.
talking about, right? It's
Yes.
it's
Yeah. Yeah. Would you? Sorry. So yeah, I said that was the last one, but one last thing. It would tips for like old dudes like me who roll for
Mhm.
injury avoidance. If I want to keep doing this a long time, what advice do you have?
Yeah. I mean, it's tough because, like I said, most of my injuries weren't about being stubborn and not tapping or somebody doing something. Um, it's recognize where you are physically vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
Most importantly, over history, if you're approaching 50, you've had injuries in your life, and you probably have a pretty good idea of, I've got longer legs than I do an upper body, so my lower
Mm-hmm.
extremities are probably more subject to the kind of torsion that would result in injuries, right? Know
Mm-hmm.
your body type, know what you're prone to, and recognize the situations that are going to put you in that are going to be more prone to injury. Like takedowns. For me, I'm only 5'9", but my legs are much longer than my upper body proportion
Mm-hmm.
wise.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I'm fast. I've always been fast for my height. So knowing that, things like practicing takedowns, be extra careful, top position when you're standing over your opponent, and they've got your leg or your foot, understand that because your limbs are the way they are, so understand your body type and
Mm-hmm.
what might put you in a more vulnerable position based on your body type, not
Mm-hmm.
based on arm bars can separate your elbow or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Understanding your body type.
Yeah. That's great advice for sure. Well, Russell, thanks for coming on, man. It's been a pleasure. I appreciate it. And I'm gonna hit stop here on the recording, but don't leave yet.
All right, pleasure was all mine, Connor.